Y'all. Stop scrolling. Right now. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to rewire everything you thought you knew about the Cardi B and Offset divorce, and baby, I'm not exaggerating when I say a judge just signed a piece of paper that pulled Cardi's whole story inside out. Offset asked for a DNA test on Cardi B's newborn baby. The judge denied it. And the reason the judge denied it is the same reason the internet is now doing math on a calculator app at 3 in the morning. Because the timeline doesn't add up. The math is mathing in the wrong direction. And there is a 2-year loophole sitting in plain sight that nobody, not Cardi's PR team, not her stylist, not her lawyer with the slicked back ponytail, can quietly tuck under the rug anymore. Pull up a chair. Take your edges off. We are doing forensics tonight. Now let me set the table for the people in the back who just got here. Cardi B filed for divorce from Offset in the summer of 2024. She walked into that courthouse with her chin up and her acrylics out, looking like a woman who had finally read the diary, found the receipts, and called Uber for her husband's emotional baggage. By the time we got to early 2026, that divorce had stopped being a divorce and turned into a full forensic excavation. Because Offset, in the middle of paperwork being shuffled back and forth, filed a motion. And not just any motion. He asked the court to order a DNA test on Cardi B's baby. Not the older kids. Not Kulture. Not Wave. Not Blossom. The newest one. The 5-month-old. The baby who, according to multiple sources cited by TMZ and The Source, may or may not be biologically linked to Stefon Diggs. And the judge looked at that motion. The judge read the calendar. The judge picked up a pencil and did the kind of arithmetic that puts grown men in timeout. And on February 25, 2026, that judge denied Offset's request for a DNA test on the youngest child. The order said, in essence, that Cardi and Offset had been separated for roughly a year and a half before that baby was even a thought. Baby, that is the loophole. That is the part everyone keeps tripping over. Because when a couple has been physically and legally separated for that long, the law in most states doesn't automatically presume the husband is the biological father anymore. The clock runs out. The presumption flips. And the man who used to have a default claim suddenly has to fight for one in court. And he can lose. And in this case, he did. Now stop. Let me say what I have to say. Because the headlines are running around the internet acting like Offset got embarrassed in open court. He didn't. Offset got something better than a DNA result. He got a public record. He got a piece of paper signed by a real judge, in a real county, with a real case number, that confirms what blogs have been whispering for over a year. The baby was conceived during a window when Cardi was, according to the court's own findings, no longer with Offset. And that is the part that should have ended the conversation. But because this is Cardi B, and because this is the internet, and because nobody on either side of this knows how to take a loss with grace, the story didn't end there. It got worse. So let me back up. Because to understand why this DNA denial is the most explosive document of the entire divorce, you have to understand the lie. Yes, I said lie. Take a breath. Because Cardi has spent the last several months telling the world a very specific narrative. She has been on Instagram Live, on her own platform, on radio breakfast shows, looking into camera lenses and giving us the sweet, hand-on-hip version of her timeline. She said she met Stefon Diggs at a specific time. She said the relationship moved at a specific pace. She said the baby was a beautiful surprise that came after a clean break with Offset. And honestly, you know what? On the surface, that story made sense. It was the kind of clean, linear, made-for-press release breakup story we love to retweet at brunch. But the court document tells a different one. Because here is the math nobody wants to sit down and do. If the judge ruled that Cardi and Offset had been separated for a year and a half before this baby was born, and the baby is currently 5 months old, then the timeline of when this child was conceived sits right inside a window Cardi has been publicly fuzzy about. Not lying outright. Just fuzzy. Real fuzzy. The kind of fuzzy that ends careers when the lights come on. And the judge, in denying that DNA test, didn't just protect the baby from a paternity circus. The judge protected Cardi's new relationship from collapsing under public scrutiny by anchoring the timeline in a place that conveniently matches her newer story. Convenient. Very convenient. Almost like the universe loves her. Or like a really good lawyer earned every cent of his retainer. Now here is where the loophole gets real spicy. Because in family law, there is a doctrine called the marital presumption. Y'all need to write this down. In most jurisdictions, if a baby is born while a couple is still legally married, the husband is presumed to be the father. Automatic. Default setting. You do not have to ask the universe. The law just says yes. But that presumption isn't bulletproof. It has a back door. And the back door is called the period of separation. If the court finds that the spouses were not living together as a married couple at the time of conception, that presumption begins to wobble. And if the separation has been long enough, formally documented, financially sliced apart, with separate residences, separate bank accounts, and separate love lives, that presumption can be rebutted or even waived entirely. 2 years is the magic number in several states. Approximately. Loosely. Lawyers love the word approximately because it lets them invoice you for another consultation. Cardi's team played that loophole like a violin. Because if you can prove your separation predates the conception by enough months, the law stops asking inconvenient questions about who was where, when, with whom. And the judge stops being a referee in a paternity boxing match and starts being a peacekeeper protecting the kid's stability. The motion got denied. The story got buried. And the court calendar moved on. Except the internet does not move on. The internet has receipts. The internet has screenshots. And the internet has a really long memory. Let's talk about the actual court order. Because I went and looked. And what we know, sourced from TMZ's reporting on April 9th of this year and confirmed by additional outlets like The Source, is that the order was issued on February 25, 2026. The judge denied Offset's request for a paternity test on Cardi's newborn son. But, and this is the part most people skip past, the judge approved a separate paternity-related motion regarding a different child. So Offset didn't walk away with nothing. He got a split decision. A partial win, a partial loss. He got to confirm what he wanted to confirm about one of the older children, but the newest one, the one tied to the Stefon Diggs of it all, was sealed off. Locked. Done. No DNA. No swabs. No drama in a sterile clinic on a Tuesday afternoon. Just a piece of paper and a quiet exit. And listen. That kind of split decision tells you everything you need to know about what Offset was actually fishing for and what the court refused to let him drag into open daylight. Because Offset is not stupid. Whatever you think of him personally, whatever your feelings are about the cheating, the songs, the constant low-grade messiness, the man knows how to use a courthouse. He filed that motion because he had reason to believe that confirming or denying paternity on that specific child would shift the divorce settlement, the custody arrangement, the spousal support negotiation, and yes, his public image. If that baby is his obligations expand. If that baby is not his, Cardi's story has to evolve in front of an audience that already had its phone out and its receipts ready. Either outcome is a grenade. The court chose to keep the pin in. And whether you agree with that ruling or not, I want you to understand the strategy. This wasn't a personal attack. This was chess. And the judge moved the queen. Now let me tell you what is bothering me. As a woman. As somebody who has watched this whole production from the front row with a bag of popcorn balanced on one knee. The part that itches at me is the public messaging mismatch. Because while the court is busy issuing rulings that quietly back up a particular version of the truth, Cardi has been on the gram talking like the courtroom does not exist. She has been making music. She has been launching products. She has been smiling on red carpets like a woman who has finally chosen herself. And good for her. Genuinely. Walk in your peace, Cardi. But the moment we, the audience, start trying to fact-check the timeline, we get hit with the "it is not your business" defense. The "keep my name out of your mouth" defense. The "you do not know what really happened" defense. Sis. You put it in a song. You put it in a press release. You put it on story. We are doing what you trained us to do. And now we are reading the small print. Because the small print says this. If Cardi has been separated from Offset for that long, then certain other parts of the public narrative also fall apart. Remember the joint birthday appearances? Remember the family photos that just sort of leaked at convenient promotional moments? Remember the public Valentine's Day messages that came and went and then disappeared from the timeline like they were never there? Some of those pictures, some of those captions, some of those very public displays of "we are still trying" happened during a period the court has now formally classified as separation. Which means somebody, at some point, was performing for cameras. And it might not have been who we thought. I am not saying Cardi lied to us with intent. I am not saying she sat down at a table with her team and said, "Let us craft a deception." Because she does not strike me as that kind of strategist. Cardi strikes me as a woman who genuinely felt the weight of the marriage falling apart, tried to hold it together when the public mood required it, and let the rest of her life leak around the edges of a story she was still figuring out herself. That happens. That is human. But the receipts are still the receipts. And once a judge signs an order saying this couple was already separated by this date, the public timeline has to bend to match the legal one. Not the other way around. And the part that nobody is talking about, but I have to say it out loud because if I do not my edges will recede, is what this means for Offset. Because Offset has spent the better part of 3 years being painted as the villain of this story. The serial cheater. The man with the babies in 3 time zones. The walking red flag with a chain. And listen, I have laughed at those memes. I have reposted some of those memes. He is, by his own public admission, a man who has made decisions that did not serve his marriage. But this DNA denial creates something Offset has not had in a long time. It creates a pocket of vindication. A small one. A polite one. But a real one. Because for the first time, the legal record says he is right to ask the question. And the courtroom didn't laugh him out. The courtroom just answered with a no on technical grounds. And the difference between being told no because you are wrong and being told no because the calendar already moved on, baby, that is the entire ball game. Now here is where I have to put on my law class hat for a second, even though I am not a lawyer and nothing I say constitutes legal advice, and please consult a professional and do not come for me. The 2-year window I keep mentioning is not a hard rule across every state. It is a rough guideline based on how separation periods influence the marital presumption of paternity, and it varies. In Georgia, where this case is being heard, the rules are a little softer, a little more case by case, a little more dependent on what the judge can be persuaded to consider. Which means the legal team that helped Cardi navigate this got really specific about 3 things. Documented physical separation. Documented financial separation. And documented intent to terminate the marriage. If you can stack those 3 things up like a wedding cake, the marital presumption starts to slide off the plate. And that is exactly what happened here. The DNA denial wasn't a moral judgment. It wasn't the judge saying Offset is wrong about everything. It was a procedural shield that protected the baby from being dragged into a paternity test that would have been legally messy regardless of the outcome. The court is built to protect children first and adults a distant second. And in this case, protecting the child also happened to protect a particular version of the truth. That is the loophole. That is how it works. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So what does this mean for the rest of the divorce? Let me walk you through it. Because the casual fan thinks the DNA denial closes the chapter. It does not. It actually opens 3 new ones. Chapter 1. Custody. Offset has been pushing for expanded visitation and shared decision-making on the older kids, and his position there is now stronger, not weaker, because the court has formally acknowledged his connection to the older children while drawing a line around the newest one. Chapter 2. Spousal support and asset division. Cardi reportedly filed for primary custody and is the higher earner, but Offset's legal team has been increasingly aggressive about what is technically a community property situation in a state with very specific rules about marital income during separation. This DNA ruling, paradoxically, strengthens his argument that the separation was real, formal, and complete, which can affect how certain assets and certain income streams are classified. Chapter 3. Public narrative control. And this is the one that pays everybody's bills. Because the moment a judge stamps separation as official, every piece of content, every collaboration, every photo op that happened in that window becomes part of the story. And the story is no longer just a celebrity divorce. It is a case study in how the law and the press tell 2 completely different versions of the same family. Now let me tell you the part that lives rent-free in my brain. Cardi B is, on paper, the winner of this round. She got the ruling she needed. The DNA test was denied. The newborn is protected. The public conversation has moved on within hours, because the internet has the attention span of a goldfish on espresso. But long term, the loophole creates a question that follows her into every interview, every album rollout, every magazine cover for the next several years. Because journalists love a loophole. And every reporter who sits down with her from this point forward is going to be tempted to ask, in that careful, hand-wringing journalist way, can you walk us through the timeline? And she is going to have to choose, every single time, whether to repeat the version that matches the court record or the version that matches her Instagram captions. And those two versions, ladies and gentlemen, are not currently telling the same story. That is the lie. I did not say it to be dramatic. I said it to be specific. The lie is not that she had a baby. The lie is the soft pedal version of when. The lie is the suggestion that everything happened in a clean, linear, post-Offset bubble when the court has now formally said the bubble started earlier than the public was told. And the lie matters because it shapes how we evaluate the man she is dating, the choices she made, the timeline of the marriage falling apart, and ultimately, whether Offset is the cartoon villain he has been painted as, or just a man who got tired of being the only person in the relationship anyone was allowed to criticize. I want to be very clear about something. Because I know what is coming in the comments. I am not Team Offset. I am not Team Cardi. I am Team Timeline. I am Team Receipts. I am Team if the calendar said one thing and the press conference said another, we get to ask why. That is not hate. That is not misogyny. That is not a woman dragging a woman for sport. That is basic media literacy. And in a world where we ask men to be accountable for the things they post, the things they say, the women they date, we have to be willing to ask the same of women too. Especially when those women have built brands on telling us they will always keep it real. Now here is the part that is going to surprise you. Because I have been on this channel for a long time talking about the men in this industry, and I have not exactly been kind to athletes, rappers, or any combination thereof. But I will say this. I think Offset, in this particular moment, in this particular court filing, has done something most men in his position do not do. He used the system. He did not subtweet. He did not write a song. He did not call into a radio show with a long-winded monologue. He filed a motion. He brought receipts to a judge. And he let the law do what the law does. Whether he won or lost on the merits, that is a more mature move than 90% of the celebrity beefs we cover on this channel. And I have to give him credit for that. Even if it tastes like spinach in my mouth. Because Cardi's team played the procedural game. Offset's team played the procedural game. And the only people who came out of this looking like fools are the bloggers who tried to spin the DNA denial as a clean victory for one side when it is, in reality, a split decision that quietly favors both. The headlines say judge denies Offset. The fine print says the judge also confirmed enough of his timeline to make Cardi's public version look a little wrinkled. Both of those things are true. And only one of them is being talked about. Which is exactly why we are here. Let me give you the one detail that nobody has been able to verify because the court documents are sealed in part. There are reports, unconfirmed, that Offset's motion included references to specific dates, specific public events, and specific photographs that he believed could establish a more complicated picture of the marriage than the press has been reporting. Whether the judge considered those exhibits and discarded them, or whether they were ruled inadmissible, or whether they simply did not move the needle, we do not know. And we may never know. Because sealed is sealed. And in family court, sealed usually stays sealed unless somebody decides to do an interview that violates a protective order. And listen, Cardi is many things, but she is not stupid enough to do that. Yet. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a baby who is loved by his mother and protected by a court. That part matters. That part is the only part that should matter when you strip everything else away. A child did not ask to be born into a tabloid storyline. A child does not deserve to be the punchline of a TikTok. And whatever this loophole did or did not do, the long-term effect is that this particular child gets to grow up without his entire identity being a public referendum on his mother's love life. That is a win for the baby. Always. Full stop. But on the adult side of the equation. On the side where two grown people made choices, signed contracts, performed for cameras, and built a brand on chaos. The story is not as simple as the headline made it look. The DNA denial is not the end of the case. It is the beginning of the next chapter. And the next chapter is going to be about money. About custody schedules. About who gets the Atlanta house and who gets the apartment in New York. About whether the prenup the internet has been speculating about for years actually exists, and whether it actually says what people think it says. About whether either of them ever sits down with a journalist and tells a version of events that lines up with the court record. About whether either of them, frankly, has the courage to admit that the story we were sold and the story the law confirmed are not exactly the same story. I am going to leave you with one final thought. Because I have ranted enough and you have been so generous to ride with me this far. The 2-year loophole is real. The marital presumption is real. The procedural shield that protected this baby is real. None of that is conspiracy. None of that is fan fiction. It is family law functioning the way it was designed to function. The drama, the rumors, the cheating allegations, the WNBA tangent, the Stefon Diggs of it all, the diary that does or does not exist, the photographs, the unfollows, the cryptic captions, that is the human static around the actual story. The actual story is a court record. A signed order. A date. February 25, 2026. And every piece of theater that has happened around it is just commentary trying to make sense of a paragraph somebody already wrote in legal English. So next time somebody slides into your group chat with a Cardi B and Offset hot take, you tell them this. Tell them the judge denied the DNA. Tell them the separation period created the loophole. Tell them the baby is protected. Tell them the public timeline does not match the legal timeline. Tell them Offset got a split decision, not an embarrassment. Tell them Cardi got a procedural win, not a moral one. And tell them anybody trying to make this case into a clean villain story is selling you a t-shirt instead of telling you the truth. Listen. I love a celebrity divorce as much as the next girl on the internet. But I love a clean court record more. And right now, the cleanest thing about this entire saga is the piece of paper a judge signed on a random Wednesday in February. Everything else is noise. Profitable noise. Entertaining noise. But still noise. The signal is in the document. The signal has always been in the document. And the document just told us, in the most polite legal language possible, that the loophole worked, the lie has a shelf life, and the next chapter of this story is going to be even messier than the last one. I want to know what you think. I want to know if you think Cardi did her thing or if she has some explaining left to do. I want to know if you think Offset deserves any grace or if his receipt collection is too long to forgive. I want to know if you think the court got it right, if you think the law needs to be updated, if you think 2 years is too short or too long for that loophole to apply. I want to know if you think we, the public, should even be in this conversation at all. Drop it in the comments. Tag a friend who still thinks this story is over. And if you have made it this far in this video, you are officially a member of the Courtroom Audit Club, and I expect to see you back here when the next motion gets filed, because trust me, there is always a next motion. There is always a next document. There is always a next loophole nobody saw coming. And I will be here, with the receipts, with the math, with the popcorn, breaking it down so you do not have to. Talk to y'all soon. Stay messy. Stay informed. Bye. Now let me come back around to something I glossed over earlier, because I see y'all in the comments already asking the question, and I do not want to leave it hanging like an unanswered DM. The Stefon Diggs of it all. Let me address it. Because the moment the rumors started linking Cardi to Stefon Diggs, the internet did what the internet always does. It collapsed the timeline into a single dramatic beat and acted like she walked from one man's house straight into another man's bedroom with a suitcase and a soundtrack. That is not what the court record says. That is not what any credible source has actually reported. The court record establishes a window of separation. It does not establish, confirm, deny, or describe the precise moment a new relationship began. Those are two different documents, and the internet has been treating them like they are one. So when I say the timeline does not match, I am not saying Cardi was cheating during her marriage. I am saying the public version of when the marriage ended and the legal version of when the marriage ended are not aligned. And that misalignment matters because every defender on Cardi's side has been using the legal version to dismiss critics, while every critic has been using the public version to attack her. Both sides are wrong. Both sides are arguing about different documents. And the truth, as usual, is sitting quietly in the middle, holding a manila folder with a case number on it, waiting for somebody to actually read what is inside. Here is the other piece of this puzzle I want to lay on the table. Because the more I dig, the more I realize this case is going to set a quiet precedent that influences celebrity divorces for the next decade. The DNA denial is going to get cited. By family law attorneys. By celebrity divorce lawyers. By legal commentators who specialize in high net worth separations. Because the court did something subtle but important. It said the marital presumption can be rebutted by documented separation even when the parties are still legally, on paper, married. And it did so in a case where the timeline was contested, the parties had a documented history of breaking up and reconciling, and the financial stakes were enormous. That is the kind of ruling that gets quoted at conferences. That is the kind of ruling that becomes a footnote in textbooks. That is the kind of ruling that future Cardi B's and future Offsets are going to use as armor or ammunition, depending on which side of the courtroom they are sitting on. And it is also the kind of ruling that should, in theory, make every couple in this country, celebrity or not, think very carefully about how they handle a long-term separation. Because here is the thing nobody tells you. If you separate but never formalize it, you are leaving yourself open to all kinds of legal complications you do not even know exist. Joint debt that you did not authorize. Joint tax filings that come back to bite you. Joint everything that the law treats as community property until somebody draws a line. And in the Cardi and Offset case, that line was drawn just clearly enough, just early enough, just specifically enough, to create this exact loophole. Which means somebody, at some point, was paying very close attention to the calendar long before any of us were. Let me tell you what I think happened. And this is opinion now, this is not court record, this is just my brain making a story out of the breadcrumbs. I think Cardi and her team knew, the moment that pregnancy was confirmed, that this was going to be a calendar war. I think they spoke to lawyers immediately. I think they pulled out every receipt, every text message, every flight itinerary, every credit card statement, every public appearance that proved the marriage had effectively ended long before the baby was conceived. I think they stacked those receipts like Tetris blocks until the wall was high enough that no DNA test could climb over it. And then they sat back, waited for Offset to make a move, and let the procedural defense do its quiet, devastating work. That is not deception. That is preparation. That is a legal team earning every dollar of every retainer. And honestly, strategically, hats off. But preparation has a public cost. Because while the legal team was building that procedural fortress, the publicity team was out here giving us a softer, friendlier, more emotionally palatable version of the same timeline. And those two timelines, the legal one and the public one, were never reconciled. Probably because they could not be. The legal one had to be specific. The public one had to be vague. Specificity wins in court. Vagueness wins on Instagram. And you cannot serve both masters at the same time without somebody, eventually, holding up two pieces of paper that do not match. I want to circle back to Offset for a second. Because I have been hard on him in past videos, and I think it is only fair to give him his flowers when he earns them, even if it is just a single dandelion. The man filed a motion. He did not go on a podcast and cry about his marriage. He did not write a 5-page Instagram caption blaming his ex-wife for everything that ever went wrong in his life. He did not call into a radio show and air dirty laundry. He went to a lawyer, paid that lawyer, and asked the court to settle a specific question with science. That is the adult version of conflict resolution. And the fact that the court said no on technical grounds does not erase the fact that he chose the high road, procedurally speaking. I am not saying he is a saint. I am saying he picked up a tool from the right shelf for once. And I think that deserves a head nod, even if it is grudging. Now compare that to the way most celebrity exes handle this kind of thing. Diss tracks. Subliminal Instagram stories. Cryptic captions designed to be screenshotted and dissected by stan accounts. Friends going on podcasts to leak information that should have stayed in the family. Offset did not do any of that this round. Whatever you think of him personally, in this particular procedural battle, he played it cleaner than most. And I have to acknowledge that, even though I know it is going to send half my comment section into a rage spiral. But here is where I get a little bit angry with Cardi. Not at her. With her. Because there is a difference. As a woman watching another woman navigate one of the messiest, most publicly humiliating chapters of her life, I want her to win. I want her to thrive. I want her to land in a relationship that feels safe and abundant and honest. I want her babies to have peace and stability and a mother who is not chained to a man she has outgrown. All of that, I want for her. But I also want her to stop telling the public a version of her story that the court record does not back up. Because every time she does, she gives the internet another reason to keep digging. And every time the internet digs, somebody finds another receipt. And every receipt that turns up, no matter how small, chips away at the public goodwill that is supposed to be her shield in moments like this. If Cardi's team had simply said, from the beginning, listen, we have been separated for a while, the marriage ended privately before it ended publicly, please respect our space, this would have been a one news cycle story. Done. Over. Move on to the next scandal. But because the public timeline was so much softer than the legal one, every new document, every new motion, every new ruling creates a fresh wave of speculation. And that speculation has a name. The internet calls it lore. And once your divorce becomes lore, you are never getting out from under it. Ever. I do not want that for her. I genuinely do not. But she does not seem to be making the choices that would prevent it. And as somebody who covers this stuff for a living, all I can do is read the documents, lay out the math, and hope that somebody on her team is whispering in her ear that the silent dignified version of this story would have served her better than the messy musical theater version we have been getting. Let me give you one more piece of legal context, because I see the people in the comments are sharpening their pitchforks and I want to be precise. The marital presumption of paternity is one of the oldest doctrines in family law. It dates back centuries. It was originally designed to protect children from the social and economic stigma of being labeled illegitimate at a time when that label could ruin a person's entire life. Over the centuries, it evolved. It got softer in some states, stricter in others, more flexible in some jurisdictions, more rigid in others. But the core idea has stayed the same. The law assumes the husband is the father. And the law makes it hard, on purpose, to challenge that assumption. Because the law is not designed to chase the genetic truth. The law is designed to protect the child's stability. Those are two different goals, and they do not always point in the same direction. What makes Cardi's case interesting is that the court applied the modern version of the doctrine, which allows the presumption to be rebutted by clear evidence of separation, while also protecting the child from the disruption of a paternity test that would have served only to settle adult grievances. The court could have ordered the test. The court chose not to. And that choice tells you everything about how family courts in 2026 weigh the interests of the child against the interests of the adults arguing over the child. Spoiler. The child wins almost every time. And in this case, the child winning also happened to mean Cardi winning. Which is convenient. But not corrupt. Just convenient. So when people ask me, was this fair, my answer is yes. It was fair. Procedurally. Legally. Based on the documents in front of the court. It was the right ruling. It just was not the satisfying ruling. And the internet does not like rulings that are technically correct but emotionally incomplete. The internet wants a winner and a loser. It wants a villain and a hero. It wants a clean ending we can put on a thumbnail and slap a red arrow on. The law does not work that way. The law works in technicalities, in calendars, in documented dates and signed papers. And the law just delivered a verdict that does not fit into a thumbnail. Which is why we are here, talking about it, instead of moving on. Now. Before I wrap. I want to say one thing about how this whole saga reflects on the broader landscape of celebrity divorces, because I think there is a lesson here that goes beyond Cardi and Offset. The lesson is this. Money buys you a procedural defense most people will never see. Cardi was able to build a documented separation timeline, hire a top-tier family lawyer, file motions strategically, and shape the legal record in a way that protected her interests and her child. That is a luxury most women going through divorces will never have access to. Most women in long-term separations get blindsided by joint debt, joint tax issues, custody battles, paternity disputes, and the marital presumption working against them because they did not know it existed and could not afford the legal advice to navigate it. Cardi got a 5-star defense. Most women get a public defender if they are lucky. So while we are out here debating whether she lied, whether he was right to ask, whether the judge made the right call, let us also remember that this case is, in many ways, a stress test of a legal system that works well for the wealthy and poorly for everybody else. And the fact that the loophole worked for her does not mean the loophole is broken. It means the loophole exists, and only people with resources can find it. That is the bigger story. That is the story nobody is putting in a thumbnail. And that is the story I want you to walk away thinking about, long after the Cardi vs Offset news cycle has moved on to whatever the next scandal is. Because there will be a next scandal. There always is. The machine does not stop. The receipts do not stop. The court documents do not stop. And neither do I. So if this is the kind of breakdown you wanted, if this is the kind of analysis you have been missing in the influencer hot take economy, you know what to do. Stick around. Subscribe. Share this with the friend who still thinks reality TV is real. And do not let anybody, especially anybody in a thumbnail with a red arrow and a shocked face, tell you the story is simple. The story is never simple. The document is never short. The truth is always sitting in a paragraph somebody hopes you will not read. And on this channel, we read every paragraph. Out loud. With commentary. Until the whole story makes sense. One last thing before I let you go, and this is the part one almost cut from the script because it is going to make somebody uncomfortable, but it has to be said. The bigger lesson buried in this entire DNA denial saga is about how women in the spotlight are forced to perform timelines for an audience that has no business asking for them in the first place. Cardi did not owe the public a play-by-play of when her marriage ended. She did not owe the public a press release about when her new relationship began. She did not owe us, the gossip-drinking, screenshot-saving, midnight-scrolling audience, a single explanation about her body, her babies, or her bed. But she gave us pieces of it anyway, because the modern celebrity contract demands that women narrate their own lives in real time, and the moment they stop narrating, the internet writes the story for them, and that story is always meaner than the truth. So when I say her public timeline does not match the legal one, I want to be very clear that I am not saying she should have been giving us a more accurate timeline. I am saying she should not have been giving us a timeline at all. The privacy was always the right answer. The vagueness was probably a survival tactic. And the loophole, the procedural shield, the sealed pages of that family court file, those are not signs of a woman lying to the public. Those are signs of a woman who finally learned that the public is not entitled to the script of her life, and she would rather protect her child than perform for strangers. And honestly, when you frame it that way, the whole story shifts again. Maybe she did not lie. Maybe she just stopped explaining. And maybe the rest of us need to learn the difference between a woman owing us the truth and a woman simply choosing peace. Drop your honest take on that in the comments. I want to hear it. Because I think this conversation is bigger than Cardi, bigger than Offset, bigger than one DNA motion in one Georgia courthouse on one random Wednesday in February. This is about who gets privacy and who does not. Who gets the benefit of the doubt and who never does. Who gets to write their own ending and who gets one written for them. And the answer to those questions is going to shape every celebrity story we cover from this day forward. And one more receipt for the wall before I sign off. Because I keep getting messages asking me whether this DNA denial is actually appealable, whether Offset's team. Talk to y'all on the next one. Take care of your edges. Take care of your peace. And whatever you do, do not sign anything without reading it twice. Read the receipts. Trust the calendar. Bye.